What's up, guys? In northern Wisconsin, and just doing a bit of scouting and checking trail cameras. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was that in big woods, and especially northern big woods, one of the things that are overlooked is scrapes. And one of the things that I key on is perennial scrapes or primary scrapes. Scrapes that are going to pop up year after year in the same spot. They're not exactly always the biggest, but they are used the most. A lot of my trail cameras that I use and my pictures that I get in the daylight show me that these bucks will come after the same scrape year after year after year. Now this is a good one that I found this year, and I'll have to determine whether it's a really good one, whether there's some big ones in the area that are going to be using this. What I really like about this scrape right here, it is on the edge of a transition. So to the north of me here is an old slashing where they had logged it years ago. It would have been hardwoods at the time and everything, so there's a lot of poplars and birch, and they left some oaks, I think, too. But then to the south of me here, this is where it starts to get really thick, where it turns into a big old moss swamp and spruce swamp. So the transition, the terrain really determines how I like it. This right here, it's actually on an old logging trail, so the deer they use these logging trails up by me. Another thing I really like about this one is that it has this really nice licking branch. Now they've really chewed this up over the years, it looks like. So right here you can see that they've just chewed it away, and it's broken off here, and then I can actually still see the scrape from last year, which tells me that this has probably been even used this spring. So they do come to this and everything. So I think this is actually a really good spot. Alright, I'm at another scrape, and I really like this area because it's also has those transitions and that switch of terrain and vegetation. So behind the camera there's actually some pretty wet stuff, and they can actually bed in that if they want to, depending on the water level. And then to the north of me here, that's where it's like some pine and some real nasty stuff. They could bed there. I don't think they like to bed in that stuff because it's so hard to get through. Just because there's so much stuff that's fallen down and everything, it's extremely hard to walk through. It's just a big mess. And then behind me here, actually a couple hundred yards, is just a huge, it's like a mile long spruce swamp and moss swamp. So, but there's actually another logging trail here, an old one that's kind of been covered up with little pine and balsam and everything. And those are essentially, they're hidden. So then those deer, they actually travel those during the pre-rut. And when they find it's like this is like almost like a hub. And there's like all these trails that will actually come together of all this diverse vegetation. So right here is the scrape, and I actually found this about a month ago, and it was actually worked at the time. And I really like this, just the scrape itself. I know that something was here recently, and then I really like just the licking branch and everything. There is a lot of licking branches they could use. This tree is alive, which I really like. One of the points that I'd like to get across is for big woods, especially towards the north, is that scrapes are important because there's not a lot of deer. We have vast areas of look through. It's very difficult to hunt. So there's less deer, there's more predators, and then there's even less big deer. So if you're after a big one and everything, you got to go off of what they give you. Beds are essentially hard to find. You can find them, but like I said, less deer, more area, less beds to find. So one of the things they actually do give us, and they actually come out in the daylight, and my pictures prove this, is the scrapes. The scrapes, they're not all treated equally, kind of like beds. You'll find beds randomly, you'll find beds all over. There are bedding areas. They're not all the same. Some are better than others. And these primary scrapes, these are actually, I think, a really good strategy as far as getting on these big ones in the daylight. So another point I want to bring up is that for scrapes, the licking branch, like I said, is very important. but it seems that depending on the area and what your bucks like, they'll choose certain types of trees. In the north, I usually will pay attention more to like red pines. They seem to really like those. Poplars. This is kind of unique, but I still like the terrain. I still like the vegetation that is in the area. I like the bedding. There is good sign around here. I found some very nice rubs around here. I've actually hunted to the west of here, and I've gotten some very good pictures. And I've even gotten some daylight pictures of some big ones. So I'm really excited about this spot. There's actually some kill trees around here that I can get to. The access is good, so I just got to play a good wind and hunt the right time of year. Another point I want to get across is the time of year you hunt these scrapes. Now, since these are perennials or primary scrapes, and they'll come out usually about mid-October, they'll start popping up around this area. Some areas are different. Some guys, they see different things, but usually about mid-October is when you'll start seeing in northern Wisconsin. So when do you hunt these? When is a good time? So in the last 4 or 5 years, I've been really paying attention to my pictures. The daylight activity, usually around October 25th up until about November 8th. So you have, 10, 15 days of possible daylight activity at these scrapes. These scrapes will not produce daylight pictures year-round. They won't produce in September. They won't. It's suddenly, all of a sudden, rifle season hits, and these bucks just turn off, and they'll move to either another area or they'll just hunker down and they won't move until night. So when I talk about scrapes that I don't really put stock into, is these ones that are kind of out in the open. They're along, regular DNR walking trails where people are. These are the ones that are probably going to be used at night. What these bucks like to do is during the night, these big trails are like a highway where they can cover a lot of ground really quick. So they make all these scrapes along these lines and everything. So this one here is normally, it's every single year it's actually here, but I wouldn't hunt this area because you're never going to see this one in the daylight. So, and this one even has a rub right next to it. So whether this was made by a nice buck, and I think it was. I think this one was made. That other one off the trail is here is another one too. So really from 20 yards apart, there's 2 scrapes. These are the types that I just don't pay attention to, just because they're out in the open and they're very obvious. These deer aren't going to feel very protected. They're not going to come out in the daylight. Northwoods, there's a lot of old logging trails, and you can find them on topo maps that are just off. And this one's right off of just their main trail, where probably a lot of people won't be able to find these unless they're actually looking or they know that they're there or somebody's showing it to them. So this one right here I found actually off of a topo map. And these ones they're overgrown, and a lot of the time they have storms come through, and there's a lot of debris that covers them up. And up here, a lot of the balsams grow up on these trails, but bucks and even the bears, they use these trails. These are their corridors. They can cover a lot of ground quickly on these ones, and they can be pretty stealthy about it. Especially when they want to get around a clear cut. So here's one that came down from a storm a few years ago. And the deer will just find a way around these. Sometimes the trail will go cold and the scrape line won't produce. And this ain't something you'll be able to pick up right away. You'll have to hunt an area for a few years. Here's a nice scrape on a white pine. And I was only after one buck over here. So I put my camera up. There's only one big one, but he really liked this area. Here's another one of his scrapes. Another white pine. And this tree was golden. Right here, a nice red pine. And he scraped all this up. And you can see he really tore up this red pine. And I actually got trail cam pics of him doing it, which was really neat. And he did come out in the daylight. And he really liked this area, I think, just based on the terrain. And over towards this way, it's more kind of like white pine patches that could be good for bedding. But there's also some blackberry brush that's out in the open. Kind of looks like field a little bit, but it's all blackberry. And then this turns into thick poplars and white pine.